All right. So, hi, everyone. Thank you for being here today with us. Um, we're going to talk about the Decision Makers Handbook to Data Science and what has changed since it was first published. For those of you who don't know me, you can find my personal website here, and I'm also the CEO of the Tesseract Academy. We're going to talk about this in a bit. I've spent my whole career in the space of data science and AI, and half of my career in the space of blockchain, and I still do. And I was one of the very first people to actually get involved in what we call executive data science. That is data science for those who are non-technical, for decision makers, for entrepreneurs, for managers, etc. And I wrote actually the first book on that topic. And what we're going to discuss today is we're going to say a few words about the book, and then we're going to say what changed over the last few years since when the book was first published, because the world of technology moves at a very fast pace. At the end, we're going to have an open Q&A. We always like to have open Q&As in our events. So if you have any question around data science, always happy to answer while we're still here. And then if you stay until the end, first of all, there are two things that are going to happen. One is we're going to be handing out free PDFs of the book to anyone who sends an email to this email address. And secondly, we're also going to make an important announcement, so please stay until the end. So a few words about who I am. Mentioned, you can call me Stelios, my full name is Stelianos. I've been in the space of data science and AI for more than 10 years. I originally did my PhD in the University College London. I'm still affiliated with UCL through their blockchain center, as I'm one of the prime experts in the area of tokenomics and agent-based modeling for economic and tokenomic simulations. And I'm also a data science advisor at London Business School. Hey, and you can learn more about me personally on my website. I shared the address on the chat, as well as the Tesseract Academy's website. So the Tesseract Academy's mission is to help decision makers understand and work with technologies like data science, blockchain, IoT. And we've run workshops all over the world for entrepreneurs. We've done it for big companies. For example, here on this photograph on the right here, this was a workshop conducted for Vodafone in Cairo, in Egypt. This was in Berlin. These are in London. This was a Chinese delegation. So we've been doing this for a very long time. And me personally, I've spent a good chunk of my career specializing in what I call data science for decision makers. And this is the book, the like two versions of the book. On the left-hand side, you can see the first version, and on the right-hand side, you can see the second version, which they're a bit different. But before we go to the differences, I thought it would feel important to explain what AI is, why I went about this effort. Okay, so AI, as everyone knows, it's one of the most transformative technologies of our time. Okay, so I think AI and blockchain are probably the two hottest words in technology right now. So when I started my PhD, this was in 2012. I started my PhD in machine learning in UCL. And back then, like many fledgling PhD students and data scientists, I thought that data science was primarily about the algorithms. Yeah, I thought that data science is, yes, it's about creating very sophisticated methods, and the more sophisticated, the better. And that's how you solve problems. So I thought, for example, that the bigger an organization, the more complicated algorithms must be using. The more data you have, the more complicated the algorithm needs to be. And then I realized that this was actually not correct. Okay, it's like when you're focused on the science, when you're focused on the mathematics, the algorithms, etc., you falsely assume that it's always about the algorithms, about the science. But in reality, technology, I'm not talking only about data science, it's primarily around the people, it's primarily around the organizations. That is, the moment you step out of academia, the moment you step out of what is like an ivory tower, essentially, and you move into the industry, into the real world, then this is when you really encounter many different forces, social forces, group dynamics. And it really becomes a much more complicated exercise to apply data science in the real world, or any kind of technology. Back then, the big buzzword was big data. Okay, now big data, you don't hear this buzzword that much any longer. You hear more about artificial intelligence. And really, creating something which is complex doesn't necessarily bring any added benefits into an organization that faces many different forces and challenges and constraints. Okay, and back then, the big buzzwords of the time, as I mentioned, were big data and Hadoop. These were like Hadoop everything. I remember Cloudera, and what was the other company, Teradata or something, and all these conferences happening in London around big data and this and that. But there was little actual understanding of data science, and well, there's lots of, let's say, fear by executives, as in, like, what is data, and everyone is doing it, and we need to do this as well, and yada 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 yada. And I think this cartoon really encapsulates very well what the approach towards big data was like around that time, right? So these things, like consultants say, 3 quintillion bytes of data are created every day. It comes from everywhere. The name is big data. Big data lives in the cloud. Blah 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 blah. So, like, this is like obviously an exaggeration. This cartoon tries to be funny, but it's actually something which we, this kind of work, this kind of language you would encounter in your day-to-day, like, professional life. In many conferences, many companies would speak in this type of manner. And the thing is that this kind of, let's say, approach, like marketing and sales approach, that was followed by many companies, whether it's like the big four, PwC, Deloitte, etc., whether it's like smaller companies, companies that were selling Hadoop services, etc. I don't think it was very constructive. Tried to create FOMO, tried to create fear into the organizations and the executives that they should really go ahead with this technology, but they didn't really felt they would probably understand it. And I'm a big fan of education. I believe that education is the key to really unlocking the value in many circumstances. And I think instead of just trying to market this kind of, let's say, technology, pretty much any technology, it's much better to educate the person, the stakeholders, those who are responsible for utilizing this technology, on the best use of this technology. So I'm a firm believer in education, and that's why I thought that what would be the best thing to do for me would be to write a book about that topic. So my PhD, I wrote this book a few years after I finished my PhD and ended up having lots of consulting experience working for companies of all sizes. And my PhD was also a very good way to learn about some of those challenges, because it had been funded by Tottenham Hotspur, which is a football club. Like, sorry for our Americans friends, like, if you're American, it's a soccer club. If you're in Europe, then it's a football club, one of the biggest in Europe, Tottenham Hotspurs. And obviously the sports is not the most, let's say, friendly environment for technology. So me walking in as an outsider with all these complicated algorithms was a very tough lesson on how to try and sell this like data science and AI to like coaches, to sports medics, to people that didn't really have anything to do with the world of technology until that point in time. And really, the book had some core objectives, okay? It wasn't like a non-fiction book aiming to be like 500 pages or anything. It's like a small book aimed at decision makers who want to read it over a weekend on their holidays and really understand what data science is about, why data science is an important topic. So the first goal of the book is to explain data science in as simple terms as possible. So explain it like I'm 5, So this is like a phrase that many people like to use, or like in layman's terms. So the objective of the book is not to explain data science in a way that it makes it sound complicated. It's not about selling, it's not about talking about the algorithms, but about the high level overview and how this can add value to the business. And again, as I mentioned, if you want to get a free copy of the book, make sure to email me at the email I just pasted in the chat. And the second goal of the book was to cover everything that the decision maker needs to know about data science, things like data management, the basics of machine learning, statistics, hiring, culture, all these important topics which really affect a business, and any business that wants to work with data science is going to encounter them. So again, data science is not only about machine learning is not only about algorithms, it's also about culture, hiring, building the right team, managing the data strategy. So these are all the topics that the book really covers in as concise way as possible. And the book really came after running a very successful workshop series in London called the Data Science for Decision Makers. And really the Data Science for Decision Makers was the start of the Tesseract Academy. Okay, so the Tesseract Academy, which now has multiple partners all over the world on topics specializing in data strategy, data science, blockchain, tokenomics, IoT, product, GDPR, data privacy, AI ethics. It really started with a simple workshop called Data Science for Decision Makers. And after this workshop went through a few rounds of iterations and through some feedback rounds, I realized that, yeah, this can actually become a very good book, obviously adding some more content, adding a few more things, which, a book is a better format for certain things versus a workshop and vice versa. And here you can see all the contents of this workshop. Here you can see those 11 chapters. The first one is around demystifying data science and all other buzzwords. The second one is about data management. The third one is data collection. So data management and data collection, but from a decision maker's perspective. So again, this is data management and data collection for someone who doesn't want to build a database, but they need to understand the implications of how they collect data and how this is going to affect subsequent decisions. Then how to keep data tidy. Again, this is into the overall framework of data management. And then thinking like a data scientist, this is my favorite part, thinking like a data scientist without being one. Okay, essentially trying to train you to think like how you could go about solving a problem, but without really delving into the algorithms and the minutiae and details that the decision maker, be it a manager, CEO, entrepreneur, they don't really need to know. Then the book continued with a short introduction to statistics and machine learning, again, from a high-level overview, but enough so that you can make a conversation with a data scientist before moving on to some frameworks for problem solving, as well as some case studies in the pitfall section of the book. The last two chapters deal with two very important topics. One is hiring and managing data science teams, and the last one being building a data science culture. Okay, because culture is an organizational culture. It has now become a very important topic. When we started discussing about this in the Tesseract Academy, it wasn't that popular. Now everyone is talking about this, especially in a remote work, in a hybrid work world. Okay, culture has become a very, very important topic. So what are the differences between the editions? So the first edition is seen on the right. The yellow one is the second edition. The first edition was actually self-published. I believe in this book so much that I decided to take up the cost and to sell it myself. And actually, this did quite well. It sold a few hundred copies with basically no promotion. And then I went to A Press, which is a very famous publishing house for technical books, and they told me that they were looking exactly for this type of book, but they couldn't really find anyone specializing in this area. That is, in simplifying technology in a way that anyone can understand it, especially a decision maker. So the second edition is obviously enhanced. Some of the graphics are better. There are also many frameworks which you can find on our website and are included in the book. Actually, on our website, we have some more up-to-date frameworks on topics such as data strategy, choosing the right toolset, choosing the right software, and as well as blockchain. The book doesn't cover blockchain, but you can find a few things about blockchain on the website as well. And again, for those of you who just joined, if you want a free PDF of the book, make sure to email me at the email that I just shared with you. So that was like a summary of the book, and I hope those of you who email me and get the free PDF will enjoy it. And I'd like to also say what has changed since then. Okay, so the title of this webinar, the title of this talk is 2 years later. Yeah, so what changed? Because this was in 2019, 2020 when the book was published. So it's give or take 2 years since that time. COVID has obviously had a huge effect on our day-to-day lives, also in the world economy, but also the technology itself has progressed a lot and has changed over the years. I want to share some thoughts around what I believe is the current state of AI versus what it was and where I think it's heading. Okay, So I think one of the main changes, which is quite interesting for me, is the change in buzzwords. So I've been in the space of technology and data science for more than 10 years. And one of the interesting things is how always there are new buzzwords or jargon that becomes dominant in a given point in time. So 2012, 2013, 15, big data was the big buzzword. Right now, I think AI has become more of a buzzword. There are many companies saying, oh, we're doing artificial intelligence. They don't say, oh, we're doing big data. Okay, it's not as sexy in a way. Secondly, there's more funding than ever. Okay, so data science and AI, if you want to create a business in this area, it's way easier than it used to be. There's just more money flying around. And the third one is that data science and AI are more commoditized, okay, which means that there are way more AI and data science solutions out there. So when I was a PhD this student in 2012, there were not that many tools. Sometimes we had to write our own algorithms. Then we started having open source tools. Then Microsoft, IBM, Google, all the big cloud providers started developing their own commoditized solutions for things like computer vision. This has reached the point to the extent that many of the solutions out there, like commoditized solutions, can actually be a much better choice than you developing your own algorithms internally, especially if we're talking about domains like computer vision, where in order for you to create a new algorithm, you would need to have to spend a lot of resources and do a lot of R&D. Then blockchain is something else. I think in terms of hot technologies, blockchain is what data science was in 2010, 11, 12, 13. It's like the new super hot topic, a lot of money around transformational technology. Most people don't get it. Everything is in flux. So imagine, for example, now everyone's talking about crypto regulation. It was the same thing with data and GDPR before these things came along. Okay, so right now, this is a very hot topic and probably is like, let's say, the contender in terms of hotness in the world of tech. So some of the money are going into AI startups, some other money I'm going into blockchain startups. And the fifth, let's say, point I'd like to make is that even though the whole space is more mature in many different ways, adoption is still lacking in many industries. So there are still many industries which are backward looking and they don't have as many, their adoption of AI is not working out that great. There's a particular industries which are a bit archaic in certain terms. They tend to have big companies which are slow moving, things like insurance, for example, banks even. They're not as sophisticated as you'd think they are in this regard. So data science, this is like the battle of the buzzwords, as the slide implies. Here you see the different buzzwords and how they change over time. So you can see that data science is still popular. Big data, not so much. It has been overtaken by artificial intelligence. Data mining is dead as a term. It used to be very popular in the 90s. And also machine learning has become more and more popular. I guess many people no longer shy away from using more scientific terms. So yeah, I guess in the next few years, we'll see big data going the way of data mining and everyone talking about data science, AI, and machine learning. Funding for AI startups, as I mentioned, there's lots of funding available, and you can see here the breakdown across different technologies. So you can see blockchain is getting a very good, very good funding as well. Artificial intelligence, obviously, big data, like this can refer more like to databases. Robotics, I guess, is the one area where funding is a bit, I mean, there's just not as much money. It's a bit of a niche area. There are not as many countries where you can find like space companies specializing in robotics. But in general, what you see is that things are very, 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 very good for investment in this area, and it's getting better and better. I also mentioned that data science and AI are becoming commoditized, and this is really a natural evolution in every technology. I think in computer science will always go for these higher levels of abstraction, and what we see is that usually new technologies that start in more advanced and high-tech countries like in the US, the UK, Germany, etc. And then you see then other countries adopting them over time, like developing countries, and then the developing countries that start start providing services in this area. So maybe they have software dev houses, which can be cheaper than a dev house in the US or the UK or Germany. And then they start adding these services into this mix. And now we're in a situation where there are quite a few AI service providers. Nevertheless, I'd like to think that the Tesseract Academy still is set apart from other competitors. And you feel free to go on the website and check our testimonials and our work on AI. There's also a case study of how we use the sophisticated algorithms in order to predict and reduce churn for an insurance company. You'll find this on our blog. Feel free to check it out. Let me post our blog, and I'll be more than happy to get your thoughts on that. And also I mentioned that blockchain is a new kid on the block. The thing is, AI and blockchain are not directly related. So there are data scientists working in the blockchain sector, but it doesn't mean that because both of them are hot technologies that they automatically work together. Blockchain has turned out to be an extremely disruptive technology. And I guess one interesting thing around blockchain right now is it's a bit like operating systems and browsers in the 90s, that there's going to be a whole new layer called Web3. And there are many competing technologies trying to get a chunk of this pie. It's something which is funny is that even though I'm primarily a data scientist and I've spent twice as much time in this area as compared to blockchain, I'm getting sometimes, I think, as many inquiries about the field of tokenomics and token economies as I get for data science. And I think this is primarily because blockchain has become very popular and there's lots of money flying around. So, and the final point I'd like to make is that AI adoption is still lacking in many industries. So as you can see in this graph, in each country, what's the percentage of the industry in total that have deployed AI versus exploring AI. And you see that in the majority of countries, there's a good level of deployment, but there's still lots of exploration, and there's also a good percentage of companies which are still oblivious to what AI can do for them. So we expect in the Tesseract Academy, based on our own research and investigation, that this trend of adoption is going to continue for at least the next decade. At that point, AI will have become a fully mature technology and will have been commoditized to a very large extent, much like is the case now with cloud computing. So that was it. I hope you enjoyed this. And now we're going to move on to the open Q&A section of this talk, where you can just ask any question you might have around AI and data science. As I mentioned, if you want to learn more about me personally, you can just go here. If you want to learn more about the Tesseract Academy, or if you need advice on AI and data science, go to the Tesseract Academy, and also make sure to send an email to this address in order to get a free copy of the book. But before we open the floor for the Q&A session, what I'd like to announce is that Tesseract Academy is planning to launch the world's first certificate in executive data science. That is, for those who want to learn how to use data science without intending to become data scientists themselves, whether they're entrepreneurs, whether they're managers. And we're currently in the talks with many experts in different areas, from GDPR to AI ethics, to data strategy, to data maturity, in order to launch this certificate. And if you're interested in this, if you think that this can be helpful for your work, for your CV, for career opportunities, make sure to send us an email. Send me an email personally, because we will provide some early bird access at a very discounted rate over the next couple of months when we launch. So this is the world's first certificate. We like to be ahead of the curve, and the lessons learned there are going to be at a fraction of the price of what you would pay at a business school. Okay, so thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this. And now we're ready to take questions. Feel free to type them in the chat or unmute yourselves. Thank you.